I made a living exposing deception. Irony is, I couldn't spot the one lie that unraveled everything, the one under my own roof. By day, I coached juries, cross-examined liars, and dissected truths for a living. I could read micro-expressions, decode body language, and unravel contradictions in a witness's story like pulling a thread from cheap fabric. But at home? Something didn't line up. Sandy used to laugh with her whole face, that breathy, crinkled-eye kind of laughter that said this is home. Lately, it stopped just below her mouth like someone had turned off the lights behind her smile. Our house, once filled with warmth and lazy Sunday rituals, felt like a stage where the actors had long since quit but the scenes kept repeating. I told myself it was the fire. The one that swallowed our home and spit us out into my grandmother's old place like pieces of half-burnt furniture. I told myself she was just tired, stressed, maybe from restarting a life she never asked to reboot. But then came the small lies. The kind people tell when they think the truth might scratch. Late nights at work that didn't match her company's hours. A phone that used to live in a pile of mail now lived in her hand, face down, always silent. And once she called me Rick. My name isn't Rick. I should have known then. I did know. But knowing isn't the same as believing. Belief demands evidence. And I didn't have any. Yet, there's a strange cruelty in watching someone you love become a stranger in front of you. Like witnessing a doppelganger learn your partner's mannerisms just enough to pass in dim light. You spot the differences. You feel them in your bones. She stopped wearing her wedding ring. Said it didn't fit anymore. She started wearing perfume to grab groceries. Forgotten meetings, spontaneous plans with friends I'd never heard of, they all formed a pattern, a dark constellation spelling out something I didn't want to read. But here's the part that hurts. I still wanted to believe her. Even as her lies wrapped around our life like ivy, slowly choking the truth out of it. It felt like living in a courtroom where the only one refusing to testify was me. And the scariest part? I wasn't just afraid of being betrayed. I was afraid of what it would make me become, someone cold, someone paranoid. Someone who used to be warm. I was trained to read truth in others. But I missed the one lie that mattered most. Because I loved the liar. And that was my blind spot. She used to run to the door when I came home. Now she barely looked up. There was a time Sandy would hear my keys in the lock and practically race me to the door, barefoot, grinning, already talking before I'd stepped inside. The kind of greeting that made a long day feel worth it. That quiet kind of love that doesn't need to shout. Yeah? Now she didn't even flinch. She'd be curled up on the couch, eyes glued to her phone, thumb dancing with a rhythm far more interested than anything I could offer. No smile. No, how was your day? Just silence and the glow of a screen she kept angled just out of view. I started timing it. How long before she even said hello? 2 minutes. Sometimes 5. Sometimes not at all. I told myself it was the job, hers, mine, the stress, the house, the season. Anything but what it really was. Until one night, I saw her thumb twitch. It was subtle. Casual. Like brushing lint from a sleeve. But I knew the move. The swipe and tap. The fast, surgical deletion of something she didn't want anyone else to see. I'd done it myself back when I was a younger man with things I wasn't proud of. She thought I didn't notice. But that kind of erasure isn't just digital, it leaves a silence behind. A tension in the room you can feel like static before a storm. I started to replay our moments in reverse. The forgotten ring. The texts with no notifications. The locked screen she used to leave open. She was erasing more than messages. She was erasing me. It's a strange thing, catching someone in the act of hiding, not because of what they're hiding, but because of how calm they are while doing it. Like you've already been written out of the script and they're just finishing the scene. Some nights I'd try to reclaim the air between us, cook her favorite meal, make conversation, even sit beside her just to feel that gravity again. But her eyes never searched for mine. It was like watching someone slowly dissolve, still there, still shaped like the person you love, but filled with someone else's silence. I didn't need proof. I already had the truth. It just hadn't spoken out loud yet. But lies don't rot in silence forever. They always find a way to echo. Every camera I installed failed only during her hours alone. Always. I told myself it was paranoia. I told myself trust mattered more. But when your gut whispers in the voice of a man you no longer recognize, the man who's being lied to, you stop pretending. So I installed cameras. Not out of malice. Out of necessity. Discreet, tucked into bookshelves and smoke detectors meant only to confirm what I hoped wasn't true. And at first, nothing. Then something worse than confirmation, absence. The system would log everything until it didn't. On the days Sandy was home alone or working from home, I'd check the feed and see blank space. No motion alerts. No footage. Just a single word, Always the same, offline. Not for hours before. Not after. Just during her time. I refreshed the logs. I updated firmware. I changed power sources. I blamed Wi-Fi, the weather, my own incompetence. But the pattern stayed loyal. She'd leave in the morning, footage rolls fine. I'd come home, footage resumes. But the hours in between, when I wasn't there and she was, silence. Digital blackouts. Time skipped like a bad dream. I didn't say anything at first. I watched. Waited. Told myself not to jump at shadows. Then one night, while reviewing backup files, I caught a fragment. A blur in the hallway. A frame, less than a second of her walking toward the den holding something small and square. Her phone? A remote? The next frame, offline. Like she'd reached out and pressed erase on reality. I didn't tell her I'd seen it. I wanted to. I wanted to march in and ask how she was overriding systems I built. But all I did was sit there in the dark, staring at the word offline like it might blink into something more honest. It was no longer a question of if she was hiding something. It was how far she was willing to go to bury it. Because technology doesn't lie. But people do. And sometimes the silence in a video tells you everything a voice never will. When I couldn't trust her, I turned to the one man I trusted with my life. His name was Drew. We'd been through it all, late nights buried in case law, whiskey-soaked heartbreaks, half-laughed confessions after courtroom wins that felt like survival more than success. If I had a brother, it would have been him. So when the silence at home turned from suspicion into a storm, I went to Drew. I didn't start with the cameras or the blacked-out footage. I just said, something's off. He didn't flinch. Didn't ask why I waited so long. He just nodded like someone who already knew what the ache in my voice meant. We sat in his garage, the one place that hadn't changed in 10 years. Same broken dartboard, same oil-stained floor, same folding chairs too uncomfortable for anything but truth. And when I told him everything, the missing footage, the flick of her thumb, the erasure of intimacy, he just looked at me and said, "Whatever's going on, I've got your back." There was no script. No platitudes. Just that. And it landed harder than any courtroom oath. Because it was him. The one person who'd held my secrets without cracking, who saw the worst of me and stayed anyway. He poured me a drink and passed it across like a quiet vow. And I believed him. Without hesitation. Without question. Because when the ground starts shifting under you, you reach for the hand that's always been steady. For the first time in weeks, I exhaled. Not because the weight was gone, but because someone else was finally holding part of it. And I didn't know it then. But that moment, that trust, would come back to haunt me in ways I never imagined. They both disappeared the same week. No warning. No goodbye. I came home on a Tuesday to find half her closet gone. Not the messy kind of gone, not the grab a few things and run chaos you see in movies. This was surgical. Measured. She took only the essentials. The clothes she loved. The heels I hated. The perfume I once bought her for our anniversary, gone too. At first, I thought maybe she'd gone to her sister's. Or maybe work had sent her on one of those impromptu conferences she used to vaguely mention. But then the silence stretched. No texts. No calls. No note. I called Drew. Straight to voicemail. I called again. And again. By the fourth ring, I wasn't worried, I was angry. Because silence from Sandy was familiar by now. But silence from him? The one person who swore he had my back? That wasn't just off. That was betrayal with a pulse. The next morning, I drove to his apartment. Same street. Same building. But not the same unit. The door was ajar when I got there, not wide open, just enough to feel like an invitation to something I didn't want to see. Inside, the place was hollow. Drawers empty. Shelves wiped clean. The air didn't even smell like him anymore. No sign of a rushed move. No pizza boxes. No chaos. Just vanishing. I stood there, staring at the absence of their presence. And that's when it clicked. That quiet, numb kind of clarity. The kind you don't feel in your chest, you feel in your knees. Because it wasn't just her. It wasn't just him. It was them. And the pieces I'd been holding in separate hands, the missing hours, the glances that lingered too long, the perfectly timed silences all snapped together like a jaw. They didn't leave me behind. They left together. And suddenly, I wasn't a man trying to fix his marriage. I was a man chasing two shadows who never intended to be caught. I finally found the truth in 14 seconds of grainy parking lot footage. It wasn't even good footage. Low resolution, gray shadows moving through a haze of digital snow. The kind of clip you'd skip past on a newsreel or dismiss as meaningless. But I watched it over and over like it was scripture. Like those 14 seconds held the answer to every question I hadn't wanted to ask. I'd called in a favor, one of those behind-the-scenes connections you keep quiet about. A security manager from a nearby parking structure just blocks from our neighborhood. I told him I was looking for someone. I didn't say who. He gave me access. Said the system auto-saved old feeds for 30 days. I didn't even know what I expected to find. But when I saw the timestamp the same morning Sandy and Drew vanished, my heart dropped before I even hit play. The clip opened with the tail end of a laugh. Her laugh. That real one, not the strained version she'd been feeding me for months, but the one I used to think belonged to us. She was wearing the blue coat I bought her 2 winters ago. The one she claimed she couldn't find anymore. Beside her, Drew. Grinning. Carefree. His arms slung casually around her like it had always belonged there. They were carrying suitcases. They kissed. Not a stolen kiss. Not a guilty kiss. The kind lovers share in daylight like they have nothing to hide and everything ahead of them is just open road. They didn't look back. Not once. 14 seconds. That's all it took. 14 seconds to unravel years of belief, to watch the 2 people I trusted most walk out of my life as if I was never even part of theirs. I didn't speak. Didn't blink. Just sat there with my eyes glued to the screen, watching betrayal in motion, frame by frame. It wasn't just the cheating. It was the ease. The way they smiled like they'd been waiting for that moment longer than I ever knew. And as I watched them disappear into the frame's edge, her hand tucked into his, I realized the truth doesn't always come with screaming or confessions. Sometimes it arrives quietly. Grainy. Unedited. And irreversible. While I gave a speech on loyalty, they were falling in love behind the curtain. It was the kind of night meant to be remembered, tuxedos, champagne, violins weaving through the chatter of the city's sharpest minds. Our firm's annual gala. A celebration of integrity, of hard-earned wins. Of the ideals we claim to live by. I stood beneath chandeliers giving a speech about loyalty. About truth. About the law, the sacred bond between right and wrong. People clapped. Smiled. Raised their glasses. And somewhere just behind the curtain, my wife and my best friend were meeting for the first time in a way that mattered. On the dance floor. Under dim lights. Beneath my name printed in gold. I didn't know it then. But now every frame of that night replays differently. Sandy wore that black satin dress, the one I told her made her look like trouble in the best way. She barely left the dance floor that evening. I thought it was just the music. I thought she was finally enjoying herself after months of distance. Drew was there too. Dapper. Smooth. Laughing with the senior partners like he belonged. At one point, he clapped me on the back and said, "You nailed it, man. That speech, best one yet." I thanked him, not knowing he was seconds away from stealing everything the speech stood for. Later, I'd piece it all together from fragments. A stray comment from a paralegal. A photo posted on social media, blurred but unmistakable. 2 shadows too close. A smile too private. That was the night it started. While I stood center stage, talking about honor, they were in the wings writing a different kind of story. They didn't even have the decency to begin in private. They began in my house, not the one with walls, but the one I built. And the irony? I meant every word I said on that stage. That loyalty is a choice. That betrayal starts long before the lie is spoken. I just didn't know I was already living proof of my own warning. I walked out of that house like I was walking out of a grave. I didn't pack much. A few suits. My watch. The box of trial notes I couldn't bring myself to leave behind. Everything else felt tainted, soaked in the slow, sour rot of betrayal. The house had become a museum of ghosts. Every room held something sharp. The faint trace of her perfume woven into the fabric of the couch. The scotch glass he left on my bar cart still bearing the half-moon of his fingerprint. A wedding photo, staged and framed, where both of them smiled like liars who'd rehearsed their parts too well. I should have smashed it. I didn't. I just turned it face down on the shelf and left it there like a closed casket. I didn't want revenge. I didn't need flames or fury or fireworks. I needed distance, the kind that doesn't measure in miles but in breaths. I called a realtor the next day. When she asked why I was selling, I told her the house didn't feel like mine anymore. She nodded like she'd heard that before. But not like this. The paperwork moved faster than I expected. And when I signed the final contract, I felt something strange. Not grief. Not relief. Just silence, clean, echoing silence. I walked out of that house like I was walking out of a grave. Not because I buried someone, but because someone buried me and I had to claw my way back up. They could have their story. They could live in the memory of what they stole. I wasn't trying to rewrite the past. I was trying to feel clean again. Because healing doesn't start with forgiveness. It starts with leaving. I now chase people like them. It's ironic and fitting. I left the country 3 months after selling the house. No dramatic exit. No goodbye party. Just a one-way ticket, a single suitcase, and a silence I didn't owe anyone an explanation for. Starting over wasn't an act of bravery. It was an act of preservation. But reinvention has a strange rhythm. You don't wake up new. You wake up unfinished, and then you build one choice, one breath, one boundary at a time. I landed in Lisbon first, then Berlin. Now I call Prague home. Cities feel safer than people. Streets don't lie. Time zones don't cheat. And my work? It followed me, a reshaped, sharper, colder. I no longer coach juries. I no longer dissect testimonies under oath. Now I dissect lives. Infidelity. Embezzlement. Internal betrayal in companies where trust is a currency more fragile than stock. I track movement patterns. Read between location pings. Decode late-night messages that say working late but mean lying well. People think the worst part of betrayal is the moment it happens. They're wrong. The worst part is when you look back and realize how long it was happening, while you smiled, while you slept next to them, while you planned a future already set on fire. That's why I see things others don't. Because I missed it once. And it nearly made me. Now, I'm not just good at finding the truth. I live in its shadow. People hire me when their gut whispers something too painful to say out loud. And I listen. Because I remember what it felt like when no one else did. It's ironic, maybe. But it's also fitting. I once defended truth in a courtroom. Now I drag it into the light. Kicking. Screaming. Unavoidable. The world hasn't changed. But I have. I see what love blinds others to. I used to think truth lived in words. In vows exchanged under candlelight. In toasts made at long tables lined with old friends. In whispered promises in the quiet hours before dawn. But I've learned something else since then, something they don't teach in law school or at weddings. It's not what people say. It's what they repeat. Patterns don't lie. Words do. Now, when a client walks into my office, I don't ask for their side of the story. I ask for the timeline, the inconsistencies, the hours that don't quite add up. Because I know where the cracks live. I know the choreography of deception, the way it pretends to be coincidence. And I know what it costs to ignore the signs. Love, I've realized, is not a shield. It's a lens. And sometimes that lens softens the blade that's already halfway in your back. Sandy and Drew taught me that. Not through malice, but through familiarity. Because betrayal rarely feels like war. It feels like home until it doesn't. I no longer believe in promises. Only in patterns. That doesn't make me bitter. Just aware. There's a version of me that died the day I watched those 14 seconds of parking lot footage, the version that believed love was proof against harm, that trust was enough. But in his place stands someone else. Someone colder, maybe, but also quieter. Still, intentional. Sometimes I wonder if they think of me. If they picture me frozen in grief, arms full of broken glass. But they wouldn't recognize the man I am now. Because this man doesn't wait to be told the truth. He finds it, names it, and walks away before it can wound him twice. The people closest to you can write the final sentence of your story. But only if you hand them the pen. I keep mine now. And every word that follows it is mine to write.